Thanks for tuning in to My Valley, His Victory, hosted by me, Mackenzie Smith, where I interview Christians who love the outdoors and have walked through valleys in their lives. In a world of highlight reels and surface-level relationships, we all have faced hardships. I believe our experiences can be encouraging to others if we have the courage to be vulnerable. 2 Corinthians 1 says, "The Father of compassion and the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our troubles, so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves receive from God." My goal is to inspire you to come to the Creator through His creation and connect you with Christians who have been through similar experiences. I pray that this podcast encourages you if you are in a valley and pushes you to share how God has turned your past valley into His victory. If you enjoy these episodes, please take a moment to leave a review on your favorite podcast platform and follow this podcast on Instagram. If these episodes have been impactful for you, or you know someone that would benefit from one of these episodes, please feel free to share it with a friend. Your support means the world to me. Thanks so much for being here. On today's episode of My Valley, His Victory, we have Amelia Harrison. Amelia is a devoted wife, a cherished mother of 3 boys, and an inspirational figure dedicated to spreading hope and resilience. She is the author of Just Show Up, president of Liam's Lite Foundation, and recently added the title of Youth and Associate Pastor. In her free time, Amelia loves to go hiking and camping with her family. Thanks so much for being with us today, Amelia.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So I know I gave the listeners your bio, but why don't you go ahead and just share a little bit more about yourself and who you are?
So I was born and raised in Oklahoma and still live here today. I have changed careers 4 times in my adulthood, and I've been a teacher, and I do bookkeeping randomly, which is interesting because I'm not a math person, which is why I have an English degree. I finished 1 book and published it myself, and I'm kind of working on a 2nd book. I think that'll be a slow work in progress. But mostly I just love exploring, and not just outdoors, just exploring anything. I call myself a lifelong learner.
I love that. I think that's an important attribute that we all need to have, is to be intrigued by learning and learning new things. I think we have so much to learn until the day that we die, but yeah, that's so fun. I love that you have written a book. That's a huge accomplishment. Congrats on that, and self-published it. Have you always been a writer, or kind of, is that a dream that you had?
It's something that I've always done. I signed up for creative writing contests and wrote poetry even in middle school and high school. So writing is something that's just, it's a gift that God gave me, and it's something that I've always loved doing. But I never considered myself a writer, had no ambitions to publish a book until life happened and thoughts came, and I just kept writing thoughts down, and eventually it would just turned into a book. It wasn't something that I initially just set out to do.
Yeah, that's fun. I have all of the respect in the world for writers. I feel like I have a really hard time putting things into words. And so I have so many ideas in my brain of things that I would love to put into like mementos or, write down to have, but can never figure out a way to put it into words. So
stream of conscious writing, just start putting it out there, and eventually you'll be able to puzzle piece things together.
Yeah. So I know that it's very new, but tell us a little bit about your new role as an associate and youth pastor.
Well, not on my radar at all. God's got a sense of humor, I think. One Sunday, our current associate and youth pastor, who will soon be our senior pastor, said, "Hey, I am looking at applications for this." And I said, "Okay, cool." And I thought maybe he wanted to bounce something off of me. And he said, "What I'm not looking at is your application." And then I'm thinking, why would you be looking at my application for this? I have plans with the foundation and looking into coaching, possibly starting a podcast. Like, my life is headed in this direction, not that direction. Both ministries, but not formal ministry in a church setting. I'm not qualified for that. I have no experience. I am no education in that kind of thing. And I sat down and tried to make a list of reasons to say no, and I couldn't find one. not a single one. And I asked my husband, why should I not do this? And he said, I got nothing. I really think you can do this. And so having all of these people tell me, you can do this, you should do this, this is going to be great. I just decided to take a leap of faith and believe them because I'm still not so sure. But, there were too many things that lined up so perfectly that it couldn't have been God sent.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really cool. That's really cool. And I know you said you just started yesterday, so
yes.
Really excited for you, and definitely will be praying for you. And I just think that's such a fun new journey for you, and can't wait to see what God does with it, because clearly it sounds like God's right in the middle of it. So I know we're going to talk about this like way more in detail later, but give us kind of an overview of the foundation and the book that you wrote.
Okay. So in 2021, our oldest son, Liam, died in a drowning accident a month before his 6th birthday. We were on vacation. The foundation came as a result of all of the love and support that we received. I think hope is one of the most important things you can give a person. And all of that love and support that was shown to us gave us hope to survive, to move forward, and to keep living. And so our goal at the foundation is just to encourage people to heal and show them means of and modes of doing that. We want to inspire hope and encourage healing. I mean, that's really what it's all about. And the book is another facet of that. I had so many people say, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. I don't know how to help. And so I just started writing these things down as they came to me. I'm like, oh, that would be really helpful, or that was not so helpful. And that's how the book came about. It was writing those things down as people would ask, and these thoughts would occur and be like, oh, I should tell that to that person. But if I don't write it down, I'll forget it because I have grief brain. And eventually there was just so much that it morphed into this little 40-page instruction manual, a little how-to.
Yeah, that's actually really helpful, because we've talked about this on this podcast, but when, people go through certain things, I think that it's really hard if you've never been through it or never really experienced anything kind of in that realm of what do I do? How do I help as a, bystander? And so I know we've talked about some tips and tricks and things, but to have an actual resource of someone, I think that's amazing that you took that experience and turned it into a helpful guide to help others, because, in one way or another, we're all going to go through grief at some point. And so to be able to walk alongside someone and encourage them and grieve with them properly, I think can be very helpful. So that's awesome that you did that.
Thank you.
So talk to us about kind of outdoor recreation and what that looks like for you and your family.
So it started with hiking. We are about an hour and a half from the Wichita Mountain Wildlife Refuge, and we were on our way to a town on the other side of that, and we decided just to drive through it. And as we drove through, we picked up a map, and there were some hiking trails, and so we were like, let's go check it out. And Liam was an infant. It was springtime, so he was just a couple of months old. And so we started hiking. And we put him in a little backpack, and we'd just go for a walk. And we loved it. And that just kept building up. And eventually it turned into tent camping, and with more hiking. And we try to hit all the state parks. And then we went to a national park, and then we wanted to go to all the national parks. So
you caught the bug.
We caught the bug. Yep. And then in 2018, maybe 2017, my husband started talking to me about backpacking. And I was like, you've lost your mind. I don't want to go sleep in the middle of the woods with nothing but a backpack. But we did. And then also on a camping trip over fall break, we rented kayaks on a lake, and I fell in love. So I got that bug too. So yeah, hiking, camping, backpacking, and kayaking, those are kind of the main four.
Yeah. And you started all of these after you had kids?
Yes. Now, I grew up camping as a kid, and so we were in a camper, and we were more at the lake to go boating and stuff. It wasn't so much hiking.
Yeah.
So yeah, after I had kids is when we started all of this.
That's interesting. I find myself talking about this often with friends and different things about, like, you know, I'm in that season of life where most people my age are having kids, and so it's like, well, what is your life going to look like once you have kids? Are you going to keep doing the things that you know are doing now, or you know, how's your life going to change? And so I find that outdoor hobbies, sometimes a lot of people end up, you know, stop doing hiking and things that they love whenever they have kids. And so I think it's so cool that that's whenever you kind of started those things and picked them back up. And I think it's so fun watching kids do outdoor activities because, man, they're just, you know, little adventurers, and they're finding little shiny things. They just notice the weirdest things outside.
Yes.
And I just love when I get to go explore with some kids, because they bring a slower pace sometimes. And I need that. I need to slow down sometimes. And they just like bring attention to the most, I'm not even gonna say strange, but just like the most unique things. Like there could be the most beautiful thing in front of you, and they're gonna like look at a rock or something in front of them.
We have collected a lot of rocks, and there's not a stick that's not a gun or a sword on the trail. And, you know, but I mean, we look for Bigfoot, or we make a game out of finding the next trail marker because it gives them something to look forward to so that they don't notice that their legs are a little tired. But it's so awesome because you're right, they do slow you down. But it's such a good thing because if it's just my husband and I, he's a fast walker. And so he kind of sets that pace, or I'm trying to walk faster if I'm in front because I know he doesn't like to walk slow. But when the kids are with us, we get to see so much more because we have to take our time.
Yes, that's beautiful. Yeah, I was watching the other day a documentary about a mom and a dad who took their 4-year-old on the Appalachian Trail, like 21, however many miles, over 2,000 miles on the Appalachian Trail. And they said that it was so unique because they had to go at his pace, you know, and they had to keep him entertained. And there was another family years ago that did it with multiple kids. And the one thing that the other family told them was, you're going to have to keep him entertained. And like, because whenever you have multiple kids, they can kind of entertain themselves. But they did it, and they said every day turned into, you know, some sort of big imaginary adventure. And it was a great time. And it was a really fun little documentary that they made about it. But I just think that's so cool because kids really are capable of so much more than we give them credit for. Like, I think so often we're like, oh, kids can't do that. And it's like, no, they can.
They can, or you should at least let them try. Now, I'm not brave enough to take our kids backpacking because we're still pretty new at it.
Yeah.
But once we kind of get the hang of it, and also they have to be big enough to carry their own crap because those packs are heavy. I'm not adding any more weight to my pack. Thank you very much.
Yes. I just got to the point where I gave my dogs a backpack. So nice. I'm right there with you. Yep. I carried their stuff for the first year, and then now I'm like, okay, you're on your own now.
Yep.
So out of kind of the places you guys have traveled, hiked, what, you know, all the outdoor activities, do you guys have a favorite place that you kind of keep going back to, or just a place that holds a special place in your heart?
The Ouachita National Forest. So it covers eastern Oklahoma and western Arkansas. And the Ouachita Trail starts in Tallahassee State Park and goes through, and I can't remember how long it is, but it goes well into Arkansas. The first 20 some odd miles are in Oklahoma, and the rest of the trail's in Arkansas. But it is beautiful, and it's so nice to just get lost in those woods. And it's one of the America's National Scenic Byways. So in the fall, it is the most gorgeous thing you could ever see. But yeah, no, that's my happy place.
Yeah. It's funny, I'm from Kansas, and I feel like all of a sudden in the past year, everyone keeps talking about this place. And I'm like, I didn't even know this place existed. And it's, right in my backyard, probably the closest national forest to where I grew up, and never knew about it. And so now I'm like, when I go back to Kansas for, some holiday or something, I'm like, I'm going to have to make a detour and go.
Yes. Yeah. My mother-in-law grew up in southwestern Oklahoma, which is basically flat plains and dirt. There's a lot of rock, not a lot of trees, and it's all red. And so when we went to Tallahena for the first time together. She was like, I didn't even know this was possible in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
And, it's just gorgeous.
Yeah, the way people have described it, I'm like, are you sure it's in Oklahoma?
Yes, I'm very sure.
It's, same thing. Kansas is flat and not a lot of trees and farmland and
corn and wheat.
Yeah. Oh, that's funny. Okay, so obviously we love the outdoors, but talk to us a little bit about how that plays a role specifically in your relationship with Christ.
So I feel closest to God in nature, whether I'm working in my flower beds or even just sitting and looking at my flowers and listening to the birds and the wind. And there's just something unspoken, but this almost physical connection to God when you're in nature. And it's the same when I'm in the forest or hiking up a rocky mountain. I mean, I can't look at anything in nature with the exception of probably snakes. But as far as outside of wildlife, you can't look at a tree or a mountain or a mound of rocks and not see God's hand in that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I also couldn't agree more about the snake part. I question every time I see one. I'm like, why, God?
Yep.
Why?
What's
why
the
are
point?
These here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and June bugs.
I ran across a rattlesnake on a trail the other day, and I was just like, in no life do I ever want to see one of these again. No, thank you. I don't understand. I'm like, what good did they do for anything?
Nothing. They're pointless.
So can you share a story about a way in which God has revealed himself to you through the outdoors?
Okay. So shortly after Liam died and all of the chaos was kind of calming a little bit, I wanted to escape so bad. I just wanted to go get lost in the woods. And we were finally able, so he died in January and our anniversary is the 1st of June. So for our anniversary, we went backpacking. And so that was our first backpacking trip since Liam had died. And it was so nice to just get out there in the woods. And I wasn't looking for anything there. I was trying to escape what was at home because it was so hard. And I just needed to do something that I had done before that brought me joy. And so while we were out there, we were walking on the Washita Trail, and it crosses a county road. And when we got to that road, there was this most perfect ray of light, like someone was holding a spotlight. And it's daylight, but it was kind of overcast. And it was like someone was holding this spotlight over this particular spot in the road. And it was right in front of where the trail crosses. And it was like God was telling me, I'm guiding you. Just stay on the path. Just stay on the trail and follow my light. And so here we are 3.5 years later. And I would have never guessed that this is where life would have taken me after such an awful tragedy. But you just got to follow that light.
Yeah. Yeah. Even if it's just a sliver, you gotta keep pushing. One, thank you for sharing that story. I think it's really unique whenever we can see those things in that way and at that time. And I think back to, the Old Testament, whenever God was leading the Israelites through like pillars of smoke and, fire and all of the things. And I think, those things are still accessible to us. I think we just have to look a little bit and pay attention. Sometimes
Yes.
he's like, I'm here, I'm over here. You just got to be paying attention. And so
sometimes it's a billboard and sometimes it's just a ray of light coming through the trees.
Yep. But you got to be aware and attentive enough to pay attention to those things.
Yes.
So,
and you can't do that without being in the Word.
Yep. I couldn't agree more. So you live in Oklahoma, which, like we said, probably isn't the most outdoorsy state in the country. So kind of in your everyday life, what are some ways that you connect with God through nature without, being on these grand adventures that someone could take as a practical piece of advice?
The first is have a little flower bed or indoor plants or hanging plants, because you can do those inside or outside. But there's something about tending to your garden and, watering, pruning, and pulling weeds. And it always feels like a conversation with God when I'm doing those things, because as I am watering and pruning and pulling weeds, I know I can see God's doing that same thing in my life. He's pouring into me to help me flourish, and he's pruning back some things about me, or maybe an activity or a person in my life that just doesn't fit right now. And he's pruning those things away to help me get closer to what he wants me to be. And then, pulling weeds, he is plucking me up out of my safe place right now and throwing me into somewhere else. And so, but he's always working. And so I think gardening is such a great analogy for that. And then actively doing it is just so beautiful. And you get to see the fruits of your labor too, which is so rewarding.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's great. I ask this question to all my podcast guests, and, some of the answers are the same. And I always love whenever we get a new one. And I think that, people have talked about gardening before, but more from the aspect of just watching something grow, but not the actual process of, pruning and pulling the weeds and all of the things. And so I think that's really, really helpful. And I know I'm the first person that probably needs that advice. I am terrible at anything alive other than animals. I have even had a cactus and somehow killed it. So
I also killed a cactus. Indoor plants are not my strong suit.
Yeah. So I definitely need to do something like that and have a little garden. So noted that for me. So switching gears a little bit into the title of this podcast, My Valley, His Victory, would love for you to share a season of wilderness or valley that you experienced and just how God showed up, what he taught you in that season. I know we've kind of touched on it a little bit, but if you want to go ahead and share the story.
Okay. So like I said, in 2021, January 2021, Liam died in a drowning accident a month before his 6th birthday. We were on a ski trip with another family that were friends of ours, and then my mom and stepdad and sister were also with us. My mom and I were not physically able to ski at that point, and Lane, my middle son, was too young to go to ski school because of COVID. They had changed the restrictions or the age restriction. And so Lane wasn't able to go to ski school. He had just turned 4. And so the rest of the group went skiing for the day. And my mom and Lane and I took a trip from Durango to Silverton to Ouray to Telluride and then back to Durango. And it was a beautiful drive, a gorgeous day. We love to just explore. And so that's what we did for the day. And so they skied. And then at the end of the day, we were all supposed to meet up at the hot springs there in Durango. But my mom and I were a little off schedule because we spent too much time in Telluride. And so we weren't going to make it to the hot springs, and we were just going to meet up back at the house. And this is where my story is lacking because I don't know what happened because I wasn't there. And I haven't asked a whole lot of questions. But I do know that Liam got separated from the group. The adults thought he was with the kids, and the kids thought he was with the adults. And what I guess did happen is that he followed everyone out and saw a pool and was just ready to go. He was so excited and jumped in. And it's because it's a hot springs, right? So the water is hot, but then it's cold outside, so it creates a fog over the pool. And he was wearing a blue swimsuit, which I now know is a big no-no. Don't do that. Bright colors, please. Red, yellow, orange, bright colors. But so he drowned. And my friend, my very dear friend, is the one that found him at the bottom of the pool and had to get him out. My husband was the first person to do CPR on him. And I drove 90 plus miles per hour through the mountains in the dark. We were about 45 minutes out. And there were several times where we should have died. But God that's a complete sentence for me. But God. It was a literal Jesus take the wheel. And we got to the hospital, and when I walked in, they were still doing life-saving measures and trying to revive him, and he was gone. We were able to spend a few days, I say able because it really was a blessing, because, we were 12 hours from home, 10 hours from home. Because of the circumstances, law required that they do an autopsy, and my husband and I decided that we would stay in Durango until Liam was able to go home. We just couldn't leave him there and wait for him to be sent home. So we stayed, and this happened on a Sunday, and so we stayed in Durango until Thursday. And in that time, we just got to be by ourselves and take some time to try to process what had happened, even though you're in shock and you can't really process it. But we had that time together and able to just be what we needed to be, and not try to entertain people in our home or whatever. So that was such a blessing from God to allow us that time to be together without all the added chaos of condolences and support. As well-meaning as it is, because you just want to show up and you want to love on them, but it was nice to just have that time apart. And then we came home and we went through the funeral and all of those things, and then people go back to life, and you're left with this new, quote unquote, new normal that you don't want to be in. And I was able to take some time off of work. I was teaching in the classroom at that point. So I took some time off work and was able to, be with Lane, and because he wasn't in preschool yet. And so he was still at home. And so we got to spend some time together, and I started going to pastoral care, which saved my life, because I was so angry with God. How could you take my child? How could you do this to me? What did I do to deserve this? Was I not faithful enough? Did I make too many mistakes? Like, I don't understand why God would allow this to happen. And through pastoral care, I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about my faith, and I learned a lot about who God really is. And that's how 6 months later I was able to look at a ray of light and hear God say, just follow the path. Just follow my light and you'll be okay. About 3 or maybe 3 months after Liam died, I found a video on my phone, and it is my favorite thing. And I have it. It's my screensaver. I have a flip phone, which is weird, but it's the new flip phone. I'm not ancient. But on the outside, I was able to put a video as my screensaver. So I put this video in, and I can see his mouth moving, and it says, God keeps his promises. And I cannot tell you how special it was, and heartbreaking, but just relieving to hear him say that to me in a moment where my faith was no bigger than a mustard seed. I mean, who would have thought that when I recorded him saying that to send to his grandparents who lived 5 hours away, that I would need that more than anyone. It was perfect. It's exactly what I needed in that moment, to hear him say, "Hey Mom, remember what you taught me? God keeps his promises." And it's just a beautiful thing, the way that you can look back and see how this connected to this, connected to this, connected to this. And God was working in all of it, in every single moment.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing and recapping that tragically difficult story for us. I know that it's been 3.5 years, but I know it probably doesn't get any easier.
No, it doesn't get easier.
But I think that you have taken the time and taken the steps to really dive into this and, into a lot of different things, as we talked about earlier. And you are now, using this story to help others and to, shed light and to give people hope and to counsel others on grieving and all the things. And so I think that it's beautiful. I think there's kind of two different routes that people take. They either allow it to define them, or they, take it and use it to help others. And so I always love, whenever people take things and the stories that God has given them and use them for good. And so I know that a lot of people have been blessed through what you're doing with this story. So I know the first time we talked, you just said it in this recap, you said you were angry with God, and you really were like, how could you take my son from me? And you shared with me in that original talk about how that sentence has kind of changed for you. So can you elaborate a little bit on that for the listeners?
Yes. So part of my bringing the denomination that I was raised in, there was the verbiage that, God takes people when he's ready for them, or because he needs them, or whatever. God gave me Liam. He gave him to me so I could be his mom, but he didn't take him from me. He brought him home, but he didn't take him. And because that makes, if you say God took my son, that makes God seem small and weak and not at all gracious and merciful and caring and loving. Because if he's taking things from us, like our loved ones, that's not a God I want to be. That's not a God I want to praise. That's not a God I want to believe in. And so going through pastoral care really helped. He really helped me to change that language to God did not take my son. God is not weak. He is not mean. He is loving and kind and gracious. And he brought Liam home where we're all meant to be, because that's eternal. So yeah, it did have to change. You have to change your language.
Yeah. I think that's really an important perspective. So I'll say mindset. I don't know if that's the right word, but switch in just what you're saying, the verbiage, and changing the belief system, like you said, that we have of God takes things, and God, because that is what I think a lot of us grew up hearing. And I think that's really powerful how you changed the perspective of that and saw that through a different lens. So as you were talking, you talked about how through this journey, you've learned a lot about your faith in God and about yourself. Could you share with us just a little bit about each one of those things, and maybe what has been revealed to you in those different areas?
Yes. So I will start with, I can't remember where it is. I'm terrible at this, but faith the size of mustard seed to move mountains. And in my mind, I'm not always a literal person, but for whatever reason, this verse has always been so literal for me, and it seems impossible to physically move a mountain. However, I now see that grief is a really big mountain, and loss is a mountain, trauma is a mountain, change can be a mountain. But all of those things can be moved, can be changed, can be overcome. Mountains can change to molehills with just the tiniest bit of faith. My faith was so small after Liam died, but it was still there because I had been spending so much time before then filling my cup, so that when it did spill, there was still something left in the bottom. And I had wise counsel guiding me. And I had people praying for me that I didn't even know. And it's funny, I've met some of them along this journey, and I've had some say, "Oh my gosh, you're that girl." And I'm like, "What girl?" "No, I prayed for you. I heard about your son and I prayed for you." And I'm like, "Who are you and where are you from?" It's happened. I could tell you 5 different stories, 5 different instances of that happening, of people just being like, "Oh my gosh, I was praying for you." When they hear just this much of my story, they're like, "That was you." But they still, after 3.5 years, still had me on their prayer list. And I mean, having a faith-filled community and having people that are adding to your cup and taking the time to add to your own cup all of that is so important, because you never know when something like this is going to happen. I mean, I definitely didn't see it coming, but because I had a faith-based community, because I had been pouring into my own cup, because they were pouring into my cup, I was able to keep that mustard seed when I needed it most.
Yeah, I think it's really important that you shared that, you had been filling your cup. And so whenever this happened, you still had a little bit left. And so, like you said, we never know whenever these things are going to happen, but it's really important that we are pouring in, because we never know when we're going to need that tiny little drop left in the bottom. Because if we don't have anything in there to begin with, we're going to crumble fast in those times. And I think it's, again, just to recap what you said, like, so important that you have those prayer warriors, even the people that you don't know, like you said. I'm assuming there are people from your church or through family and friends. And so the moment you put out like, hey, like, that's why you need people that will call on those people in times for you. I know I'll always take as much prayer as I can get.
Absolutely.
You can never ask too many people to pray for you.
Yep.
And so that's really cool that you've now gotten to meet them and connect with them through this journey. So I know that this is always a really hard question for this particular situation, but, looking back on your journey, what, encouragement or piece of advice or whatever you would want to say to a person going through a similar season that maybe, in that first couple months of really struggling with a loss?
Keep breathing. Yes. Keep breathing. Celebrate the small successes. Sometimes just making it through one more day is a success. Sometimes brushing your teeth is a success. And if you have some gold stickers, get them out, because every moment that you keep moving forward is something to celebrate, even when you don't feel like celebrating. But you can be proud of yourself for that. And you have to let people help you. I can do this by myself kind of girl. I am a strong, independent woman. That's the way I was raised, but it's also so important to accept help, especially when it's being offered to you. My favorite story about this, the morning of Liam's funeral, I could not get dressed. What do you wear? What do you wear to your child's funeral? How do you fix your hair? Am I supposed to put makeup on, or am I supposed to look like crap? Because that's how I feel on the inside. All of these things, and I just couldn't do it. So 3 of my friends showed up, and those are my people. They're my go-tos every time for anything. They showed up. They physically got me dressed. One of them washed my dishes. And as we were walking out the door, they smacked my husband on the butt. I mean, like, but they showed up because all I said was, I can't get dressed. And that was a cry for help, but that was as far as I could go with it. I couldn't explain. And here they are walking through the door with a cup of coffee and putting my shirt on because that's what I needed. But I had to let them do that. I had to accept what they were offering. And I think we get so consumed by, I don't want to inconvenience someone, or I don't want someone to see this part of me, or whatever that looks like. But it's so important to let, even if it's just one person in. I had another friend that all I did was, when I was having a faith crisis, she was my person. I would text her my questions and she would say, I'm going to pray. And she would pray about it. She might reach out to her faith community to get answers for me to help guide me through this. But I had to ask. I had to put it out there.
Yeah, I think that's really important. So I'm going to throw you a little bit of a curveball. I'm going to ask a question.
Go for it.
That I did not prepare you for, but if you would be willing to answer. I have seen firsthand something like this, like, destroy couples. And so I would love for you to just speak a little bit to going through, or, how to navigate this season of grief with a partner, and kind of how to support each other whenever you don't have anything to give, or, I don't even know the right question to ask, but just navigating this with a partner and being able to still support each other and love each other through something like this.
So I don't know why I knew this. I don't know if I had heard it from a friend who had lost her son who was my age, or if it was just the Holy Spirit saying, you need to pay attention to this. But as we were leaving the hospital, one of my first thoughts was, oh my gosh, my marriage. Because the divorce rate for parents who have lost a child is astronomical. It's over 50%. And so we got back to the condo, and, Tyler had been in his swimsuit standing barefoot in an emergency room floor. And so he needed a shower, and there's something about just washing all of that stuff away anyway that is somewhat healing. And so we get into the bathroom, and I'm trying to help him get in the shower because he's wrecked, right? As any parent would be. And I grabbed him by the shirt collar and looked him in the face and said, you listen, and you listen good. We are going to get through this together. And he kind of looks at me and nods his head. And I said, no, I need you to promise me that no matter what, we may get through this together. And he did. And I asked him a couple of more times because I wanted to make sure that he understood what I was saying, because the odds were stacked against us. And so that was something that we addressed very early. And then about a month in, I read this book, and it is hands down the best book I've ever read about grief. It's called The Irreverent Guide to Grief. And I'll leave the subtitle off, but it's a fantastic book. I have probably given out 50 copies since I read it myself. And in that, one of the first things that she talks about is grieving your own grief. And I am a problem solver. Acts of service is my love language. And I'm a little bit controlling, or a lot.
You sound a lot like me.
And so when I am reading grief books and talking to my friends or going to therapy and pastoral care, and I don't see any evidence of my husband doing those things, I get concerned, because I'm like, you need to grieve and you need to work on healing and processing and all of these things. And this is working for me, so you need to do it too. And I'm sure that he really just wanted to tell me to shut up and go away. But when I read that, I was like, oh my gosh, we don't grieve the same way. Our trauma, our experiences weren't the same because we weren't together when it happened physically. I can't tell him how to do this. There's not one right way to grieve. There are very unhealthy ways to grieve, but there's not one right way to grieve. And so as long as he was grieving, as long as he could tell me, yes, I'm processing. Yes, I'm working on it. I didn't have to have details. I just needed some kind of verbal reassurance that he was doing that. And we've been very fortunate that my down days are typically not the same as his down days. And so we're able to give each other the space that we need, or take care, because we now have a third son, Landry, who's now 18 months old. He's able to take care of the boys while I'm curled up in the bed, or if he needs space to just play on his computer or take a nap or whatever, then I can help pick up the slack also. But it takes a lot of recognizing, because sometimes it's not me saying, hey, I'm having a bad grief day. Sometimes I'm just really cranky or overly emotional, because I'm not typically a crier. But he is able to recognize, and I am able to recognize a little bit better now as time has gone on, hey, this is a grief day and he needs some space, and respecting that space and letting him have that time. And he does the same for me. I'm so glad you asked that question.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I know it was not a prompted question that I prepared you for, but it came to me as we were talking through this, because, like you stated, the divorce rate is really high for people that have gone through something like this. And I know that I have a lot of men actually that listen to this podcast, and, just for the opposite partner or, whatever, I just think it's always helpful if there's more than one person involved to provide a little bit of insight on that. And so just thank you for being willing to answer that part of it. Well, Amelia, thank you again so much from the bottom of my heart for sharing this story and for being willing to be vulnerable and to talk about this. And again, I just think it's so special how you are using this story. I've said that a few times, but just using this story to help others, and through the foundation and through the book. And so we'd love for you to share a little bit more about that, and just like where people can find more information or learn about the foundation or the title of the book so they can look it up. I'll put all the links in the show notes, but if you just want to give us that info.
So our website is Liam's Lite FDN, which is the abbreviation for foundation, liamslitefdn.org. On our website, we have links to, you can fill out a contact form if you have questions, or if you just want to talk. It goes directly to me, the contact form does. And if you sometimes I lost my child, I lost my husband, and they just want to tell me their story, and that's great. Sometimes they want to talk, and I am here for it always. We do an event that's called Hope in the Healing, which is a grief support group for women, and we meet about once a quarter, and we have a weekend retreat in the summer. And we actually just finished our weekend retreat, and it was amazing. It was so amazing. And I always think that I'm doing this for other people. And then God shows up and points a finger right at my nose and is like, are you paying attention? And so it's just lovely. It really is. It's so nice to be in a room with people who get it. And I don't have to explain certain things because they get it. They've walked in those ugly shoes and they just understand. And a common misconception, it's not just for mothers who have lost children. In fact, at this retreat, I was the only mom there. I had widows and I had orphans, but I was the only one who'd lost a child, which I thought was very interesting. And so it's for any woman who's lost someone. It could be your best friend. So the information about Hope and the Healing, we update that as events come on our website. And my book is also available on the website, I think under resources. It's called Just Show Up. I do ship those out myself because we're not on Amazon or anything yet. So if you order one and it takes 3 weeks to get it, just know it's me. I'm the problem, and I have no problem with getting an email. Hey, I never got my book. Sorry about that. I'll get it taken care of.
That's funny. Oh, it happens. It happens to the best of us. Well, thank you so much for sharing those resources and sharing the things that you are doing with us. And again, thank you so much for being here and for sharing your story with us.
Thank you so much for having me. This is what it's all about.
Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode of My Valley, His Victory. If you or someone you know are interested in being on this podcast, please email myvalleyhisvictory@gmail.com.